TikTok ban and the
TikTok ban could
The TikTok ban.
Fallout from the TikTok ban.
The TikTok ban.
China.
All right, so we've all seen it, we all heard about it. TikTok has been banned in the US and they've been sweating it out in court for years now, and it looks like all hope is lost. But there may be a way out for them. But to understand how, we need to understand exactly what happened. And to do that, I'm here to take you through it. I'm Michelle Manuel, and welcome to Tech Haven. So, for some context, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company based in China, and it has over 1.5 billion active users. That's like, 18% of the world's population. Insane. But out of the 1.8 billion, 150 of them are actually in the United States of America. And here's the problem. The US government fears that one day, maybe the Chinese government could ask ByteDance to use TikTok to get information on American users and do whatever they want with it. And if you know China and America, you know they have very different political ideologies. And one of those stated concerns is that they may use TikTok to push their ideologies into the American space. And some of the other things they worry about is China using TikTok for espionage and recruitment of spies in China, and all the typical movie tropes, right? There's actually been many studies that show that repeated exposure to specific statements on social media can increase their perceived truthfulness regardless of the content's actual validity. Take it again. So there's actually been a lot of studies that show that repeated exposure to statements on social media can increase their perceived truthfulness regardless of the content's actual validity. And this is what has actually sparked concern in the US about data privacy and even content manipulation, which is ironic because if you know the US, you know you get there. But this is exactly what's happening in the US. So with this happening, the US has set what they call the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Application Act. Yeah. And they've abbreviated it to PAFACA. Now, I can't say that too many times because I guess we all know why. But what does PAFACA do? In April 2024, President Biden signed a law which basically says that apps controlled by companies considered foreign adversaries, of which China is part of, need to sell their US operations to someone else or face a ban in their country. Now, honestly, if it was any other country, TikTok would probably have not cared. But America produces some of the most watched content on social media and on TikTok specifically. So that's definitely going to take a hit on the app if it's banned. So in January this year, which is just right now, the Supreme Court weighed in and essentially upheld that law, which means that ByteDance had until 19 January to sell or get banned, which is today. I think it's important to mention that they are not being asked to sell the entire company. Right? They're just being asked to sell their US operations so that ByteDance and China would have nothing to do with the back end of TikTok inside the US. Now, the idea is that if an American company owns and runs TikTok, it would no longer be under the influence of China. So now, ByteDance couldn't sell before the deadline, and so TikTok has been removed from the App Store. That means that there are no downloads and there are no updates for TikTok from now onwards. And the idea was that if you already had the app, yes, sure, it'll work. But now it has been completely blocked from working, and they show you this message that you have to learn more or leave. But even if it was still working, the thing about apps is that when people use apps like that at that scale, they need to constantly update the software because when people use it that much, the software infrastructure keeping it together falls apart when there are no new updates. So to get to a point where you click on something and it won't open, you click on like, it won't like, you click on somebody's profile, it won't open. And that's the kind of thing that lack of updates to an app does, right? And as I also said, a lot of TikTok's viral content comes from US creators. And so if they're suddenly off the platform, I know that TikTok's general vibe will actually fall apart and I don't want content to be there anymore. Now here's the irony in all of this thing. Critics are pointing out that US tech companies like Google and Facebook collect just as much data, if not more, than TikTok. But because they're American companies, they're not under the same scrutiny. But I guess that makes sense because, it's home buddies. They are all American companies. So whatever the case is, it stays in America. So today was the deadline, 19 January, the day I'm recording this, and TikTok hasn't been bought. So it's now off the App Store and it's not working. And what's funny is that President Biden didn't want to be the bad guy, so he left that decision for Donald Trump's administration, right? And Donald Trump doesn't also want to be the bad guy, so I'm seeing some speculations that when Donald Trump comes in power tomorrow, he might extend the deadline. Recording this, TikTok confirmed that they are now operational in the US. They've opened it again. I think Donald Trump's speculation was true. He is working with them to sort of work through it and see what the best solution will be like. So
Yeah, the speculation was true, and I don't know what to do. I've already recorded it, so here you go with the new information. But you can continue.
So this whole TikTok saga is actually more than just one app. It's more of the intersection between tech and geopolitics and the way social media has become the main battlefield for all of them. And even if you want to leave the US, European Union, for instance, they have been forcing companies to do certain things. And right now, it looks like it's good. For instance, Apple's Type-C thing. It was not Apple's idea to change Type-C. It was actually the European Union forcing Apple. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to sell in Europe, which is, I mean, they would never do that. So Apple was sort of forced to make all their phones Type-C, which right now is a good thing, right? But when it gets to a point where there's a lot of government interference in tech innovation, if we are not careful, it might get to a point where it might start to negatively affect tech innovation. That's because these governments, they are run by people who have certain ideologies, right? And so if these ideologies come into conflict with tech innovation, it can really affect the space, and I hope that it doesn't get there. But what do you think about all of this? Do you think it's about safety and security, or we are just seeing government flexing their muscles in the digital space? I mean, we are in Ghana, so none of this is our concern anyway, but let me know in the comment section. I'm Michelle Manuel, and I'll see you next time.